lot of new construction is happening right now, and those are sort of great big condominium complexes that don't seem to have too much personality, where before you might have three little cute houses that were built in 1900 or so all in a row. Those would be gone now, and in their place, kind of a big tall box of Kleenex with just anonymous apartments and condominiums. So that's the first thing I can think of in terms of architectural change.
Has any of this architectural change happened in like your street area and that sort of thing?
In my immediate neighborhood, not the specific sort of big box condominiums that I'm talking about, but there has been a little bit of new construction. One neighbor remodeled their little tiny bungalow and turned it into sort of a rather large mini mansion, and also with a rather large mini mansion garage that doesn't seem to fit into the sort of style of the neighborhood. That's the only direct thing I can think of.
What do you think West Seattle lacks, and how do you think it makes up for those things?
Well, what does the West Seattle lack? That's a hard question. I think more music venues, more thrift shops, and we have a lot of great parks. I think it would be neat if we had a way for people to get around West Seattle, like one big trolley or shuttle that people could leave their cars in North Admiral and take a shuttle down to the Morgan Junction. I guess we sort of have that with the bus system, but it doesn't seem to work that well for most people.
How have like the parks changed? Which parks are newer and which parks were there when you moved?
So Lincoln Park was, of course, there when I moved here. The newer park I can think of is the Ercolini Park, which is over kind of behind the junction. It's a little playground. Another new park is a little sort of city park that's near the Morgan Junction, and I think that's kind of neat. They took down some buildings because they were going to, as I believe, put in a light rail that didn't come through, but the city was able to purchase that property, and there's some benches and a little place to run around. So I think they call that a pocket park, and I think those are neat. So if we could have more of those rather than just empty lots or stale-looking buildings, I think that would be good.
When you first moved here, where did you like to go and what did you like to do?
When I first moved here, I actually didn't stick around in the neighborhood. I would go back to my old neighborhoods and see my friends that lived there and see music, go to restaurants, etc. So when I first moved here, I didn't do much in West Seattle.
When did you start doing most of your shopping and that sort of thing in West Seattle?
I think it was about 5 years after I moved here, and as I mentioned earlier, it was just before Christmas, and I, at the last minute, decided to actually buy Christmas presents. And I just went down to this strange little, what I thought was a strange little shopping area, and was able to, in 3 hours' time, buy presents for my whole family and all my friends. So that's when I started using that area.
How is your neighborhood different from other neighborhoods?
My neighborhood is different from other neighborhoods within West Seattle in that the houses are very small and close together. We have big yards that I like. And my overall neighborhood, my neighborhood of West Seattle, is different from other Seattle neighborhoods in that it's, in my opinion, it's sort of 5 or 6 micro neighborhoods that make up West Seattle. So it makes it kind of a bigger pool of people and friends and businesses versus other neighborhoods, say Madison Park or Fremont, where that's their one neighborhood. We're lucky. We have Arbor Heights, we have North Admiral, we have Morgan. So I think that's sort of what sets our neighborhood apart.
Would you ever want to move somewhere else?
Probably. I don't have any idea where, but if a good opportunity presented itself to me, I would try out a new neighborhood. But that being said, I think I would be just as happy staying in West Seattle for years and years and years. Also, periodically going to the parks or taking walks and that kind of thing.
What has been the most noticeable change in West Seattle?
I think the change in the junction, the sort of more modernizing the businesses there, and I think there are a lot more cars, and I think they drive a lot faster, so it feels a little more trafficy here.
Do you think that's a good thing, all the change in junction?
The changes in the junction, I think, are good because it more appeals to me. The traffic and the speed of people driving, I think, is a very bad thing, and I'd love to see that change.
Have any like new housing
Property. At some point, I think it was maybe 10 years ago, they leveled all those houses, tore them down, and put up some newer houses with also subsidized for people who need help, who don't have a high income, who need help paying rent, but also other folks could come in and buy those. So that's been a big change. That's definitely a new housing development, but it's in place of an old one, and it's quite nice, actually.
What do you think the biggest change has been?
In West Seattle, the biggest change, I think it goes back to, again, the junction changing so much over 20 years. The traffic and the amount of cars and how fast they drive has definitely changed for the worse. And then sort of the third thing would be the housing, the new construction that's gone up, the apartment complexes, the condominiums, that kind of thing.
How is like the style of people change? Like appearance, hobbies, that sort of thing.
Okay, so when I moved here in 1994, and now it's 2000, almost 14, style was, for people in the 20s and 30s age range, was sort of the grunge look. I actually think that's kind of still in a little bit. Old folks, their style seems to stay the same, I think. I don't know, what do you guys seems like? The not fashion style of people, but the kind of type of people or their personalities here has changed. And I think this is more personal attribute of mine, is that they seem more friendly than when I first moved here, and I think that is because I was a little resistant to being in West Seattle when I first moved here, so I wasn't open to the community. As the years went on, I became more open to this community, and I find that, at least for me personally, it's changed in that respect. It's more open and friendly. I did want a house. I wanted to buy a house, and I wanted certain things in that house. When I looked in those supposedly hip, youthful neighborhoods, those houses were too expensive. So I came to West Seattle because it was not as attractive to people, and so therefore the housing prices were low. It was what I could afford.
When you were looking for a house, what were you looking for?
I was looking for a big yard, an old house, and a basement, and potentially a garage, but I was willing to give that up.
Would you have picked any other neighborhood?
Within West Seattle or outside of West Seattle?
Either way, like not necessarily Finney Ridge, but like the ones that you mentioned earlier, but like one of the other neighborhoods, like Georgetown, for example.
No, the other neighborhoods such as Georgetown or say South Park or Burien, North Seattle, those weren't too well known to me. We're a group of places. Either. I like going to the junction.
How do you think a trolley could improve, like,
that it would be neat to, and this is radical, but eliminate cars on California almost altogether and have sort of a car route that, you know, out of West Seattle. A lot of people would not like that, but I think a series of shuttles or trolleys that go up and down California and maybe 35th and then maybe along Beach Drive, the 3 north-south routes. Now, I'm never going to get away with people getting rid of cars altogether on those major routes, but if there were a way to make it more attractive for people to not jump in their car to run to North Admiral, I think that California and some of those other routes would be more fun, more interesting to be on.
What do you think of the metro buses?
They don't work for me right now in where I work and where I bring my daughter to school. I know that they work for a lot of people, and I know that recently they've made some changes, added the C line, which a lot of people complain about, but I think that's because it's still new and they're trying to sort it out. So I guess it's hard for me to answer that question because I don't use the buses.
You said that a friend told you about West Seattle. Did any of your friends already live in West Seattle, or did they follow your lead?
No, I didn't know anybody who lived over here. And the one friend that was suggesting West Seattle to me, Anya, she ended up being my roommate over here for a year or two before she bought a house in West Seattle. And then her sister bought a house in West Seattle. And then another friend moved, and other friends moved. And then, of course, I made new friends. And so I guess, yeah, I came here to West Seattle not knowing anybody.
Remember, probably age 4 or 5.
Not that much. The biggest change was the biggest change that I remember was like some of the big apartments and tearing down Petco and that sort of thing. And then like the amenities change that I noticed was going from like a big box of a computer to a laptop.
I think I've noticed a lot of like big boxy apartments and stuff coming up. And I think the phones have changed a lot. Like I know my parents have these little tiny flip phone things, and then they have smartphones.
So I don't have any more questions.
That was great.
Thank you.
This doesn't have a signature.
That's Miss O'Donnell.
And Alina.
Minors, parent, guardian.
Spell your name. Well, you're both going to have to talk on here and spell your name
Yeah.
and all that. The one who doesn't say the date, then will say, so if you're going to start, you'll say the date and the place and who you
So
are.
November 14th, 2013, and
We're at Madison Middle School.
we're at Madison Middle School, and I'm
And spell your name. And I'm with.
Okay, and
And hand it to Alyssa, and Alyssa will say your name and spell it.
Okay.
And then you'll say, and we're interviewing, and hand it to who you're interviewing, and Charlotte will say your name and spell it.
Okay.
And then you'll jump into questions.
Okay.
So, and this needs to be solid, so if you ever see it blinking, it'll go out. Or
Okay. Just start out by saying the date and I hit record.
Yeah,
Do you have to hold it?
it's recording.
November 14th, 2013, at Madison Middle School. Hi, I'm Alina Guyon, Alina Guyon, and I am interviewing with
Alyssa Crosby, Alyssa Crosby, and we'll be interviewing.
Cheryl Guyon, SherYl, Guyon, Guyon.
Okay.
Our first question is, where do you live? Like type of housing or?
Right now, I live on a boat on Lake Union.
Okay. How long have you lived there?
3 years.
Where else have you lived?
Prior to that, I've always lived in West Seattle and still consider West Seattle my home.
How has your neighborhood changed since you started living there? Or like, what do you remember most about that change?
Well, in regard to West Seattle, when I when I was, I guess earliest memories when I was little, it was very much like a small town, a small kind of community, and everybody knew their neighbors. Everybody, kind of worked together towards things, and things always felt very small and very safe. And I think as time has gone by, we've become really much kind of a bigger part of the city. Big change in number of people that live here, and just kind of the sophistication, if you will, of West Seattle.
Okay.
What was it like to live here when you were our age? Like, what did you like to do after school, or what do you remember most about your activities after school?
We always walked to school and walked home. After school, maybe we'd go to Hiawatha or Lafayette, play on equipment. Weekends going down to Alki and things. But, I think our parents didn't structure our time very much. I think we were just kind of let to go, ride bikes and run around and be home by dinner.
How did the amenities change? How quickly did they change?
By amenities, do you mean services available in West Seattle? I think some other changes in West Seattle. When I was young, I think people, as far as school clothes and shopping, there was a Sears and a J.C. Penney and a Woolworths in the Junction, so you kind of go and get all your stuff just locally. Restaurants, there weren't so many. It was pretty simple. Again, more like a small town. And I think now, thinking of if we're going shopping, we're just traveling in our cars a lot more than we used to. I think going to the mall, going to Target, going all these different places for things.
What was like the fashion
I think I was just concerned about kind of blending in. Other girls were perhaps a little more stylish or into it, but definitely less emphasis on it than I think there is today.
How do you think small businesses have changed around West Seattle, in the Junction and everywhere?
Not just in West Seattle, but everywhere. I think we're competing against, the Targets and the Walmarts and the big stores that really have an advantage for keeping prices low. Makes it harder for small businesses to survive. And I think rents have also gone up, property values have gone up, so that's also contributing.
Okay. Is there a reason why you choose a boat over a house?
For us, I think it was just a change of lifestyle. We had always lived in West Seattle, enjoyed a variety of neighborhoods and homes here, and was ready not to mow a lawn anymore. There wasn't a lot of pride in the building, and I think that showed in the kind of the behavior and attitude of kids. It was considered one of the tougher schools in the Seattle district. Now I think it's a real source of pride to be here. The building is beautiful, and that's one of the major differences I see. I also see the academic rigor has really risen. I mean, I remember the homework I had when I was in middle school. It was pretty simple compared to what you guys are getting. So I'm impressed with what you're able to do. As well.
What was one of the most popular stores that young kids liked to shop at when you were our age?
Kids really didn't have the kind of disposable income then than they do now. I think now more kids either have money that they've earned, or the parents maybe are a little freer with giving money. So if if we had some, extra money or wanted to go shopping, it wasn't much for clothes. I mean, there was, like I said, a Penny's here and a Sears outlet. But we'd go up to Northwest Art and Frame, was there, and that was fun because there was art supplies and crafts. There were a number of drugstores up in the junction, so probably at this age, we're going up and going to Bartell's and looking at the lip gloss and the makeup and stuff like that. So, and going to South Center was the Space Needle on the other side was notable, and then I remember when they built the, we called it the black box that the Space Needle went in, which was the, I can't remember, it was 50 stories, and that was a big deal. And then, kind of in the 80s and 90s, I mean, just, huge development as far as skyscrapers, and again, I think the city really grew up from being a small kind of, small, simple city to something that's, I think now really a world-class city. House, clothing, so that we're not traveling in our cars so much. I think that from an environmental standpoint, that's important. I think if we can provide kind of more of the full picture of what people need and provide it in West Seattle, that would make a huge difference for our local economy because people would be inclined to stay here and support it.
Okay. Were the classrooms different, like the inside or the feeling of the classrooms now?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, before the building was remodeled, classrooms were pretty dingy, pretty depressing. There wasn't much investment that had been made in them, and now I think they're, very professional.
Have you lived anywhere else in Seattle?
For a short period of time, I lived up by Volunteer Park, Capitol Hill, and then currently live on Lake Union, but otherwise always come back to West Seattle.
Have you been?
You can do that.
Do you have any questions for us?
Oh. I'm going to ask each of you the first question, the same question, which is, what do you like most about living in West Seattle? Lisa?
I like being so close to the beach because in some places you're not very close to water, and for some people it's kind of a big shock to go somewhere and see all that ocean. So I like seeing that because I live so close. So it's like we can go down there whenever we want.
Projects done and get your work done, because when the sun's out, there's no more beautiful place to be.
Thank you.
Well, just that having traveled and been lots of other places, I always call this home and always want to live here.
Well, I am.
One of those days. Thank you. Oh, excuse me. passing back and forth talk into this, okay? I'm gonna be sure it's going, you see the seconds ticking off, okay?
My name is Braden Swanson, BraedenSwanson.
My name is Hope Alcoba, Hopealcoba.
And we are interviewing.
John Spengler, JOHNSPENGLER.
So, let's start out. It's November 14th, 2013, and we're in Madison Middle School doing the Southwest Seattle Historical Society thing. Yeah. So, where do you live?
The address,
Sure.
3024 Walnut Avenue Southwest, across the street from West Seattle High School.
Okay. So how long have you lived here?
Just over 20 years.
Okay.
Have you lived anywhere else in your life?
Yes, I lived a lot of different places. I grew up in Seahurst, which is just west of Burien. I lived in California when I was in the military. I lived in Florida for a while. And here.
Okay. Since you've been living here, how has your
You weren't able to go into the park at all at that point. Since then, the neighborhood has changed so that we're now the elders of the neighborhood, apparently. Everybody that lived there when we came in has gone. Many of the people across the street were original owners from the mid-40s. Right, the houses were built right after the war.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what were the houses like in the neighborhood by Hiawatha and stuff?
Well, the side of the street that I'm on, our house was built in 1910. The house to the south of us was built at the same year. On the other side, it was built in 1908 as a farmhouse. The area where the West Seattle High School is down in California was an orchard at that time. Since we moved in, not much has changed other than it's been updated. People have saved the houses and protected them and remodeled them. Very few of them have been torn down.
So how many houses were there? Because you said that there was an orchard there. Were there the same amount that were there, or less?
Well, the original houses built in 1908, 1910 were on the east side of the street. The west side of the street that the West Seattle High School is on was all orchard. Those houses were all built right after World War II.
Okay.
On the other side of West Seattle High School, there's a bunch of shops like BCC and other places. Were there houses there originally?
I don't know how far the orchard extended. I heard that it went at least to California, but it may have gone beyond there. I can't imagine the orchard would have done that, though. That would have been huge in those days.
So since you've been living here, what have the amenities changed in the house, and how have those influenced your life?
Well, the house was mostly remodeled before we moved in 20 years ago. Since then, we've added some things to the structure that are of the age of the house. Don't know if you're familiar with chair moldings, but the ceilings are 9-foot ceilings, and there are picture moldings a foot down from the top of the ceiling that we put up. We put in mop boards at the bottom. There's chair rail moldings so the chairs don't scar the walls. The interior architecture has been preserved for the most part, yet updated.
Mm-hmm.
Used to have a deck on it that didn't go with the house, so we took it off and put a porch on. Opened up the front porch, it was all enclosed, and we brought it back and made it open. So so it looks like it did originally. Then everything is new. There's nothing that's old anymore except houses and people.
Okay.
What do you think West Seattle lacks, like in businesses or different types of jobs or things? And how do you think it makes up for those in other things?
I have not found that I've missed anything in West Seattle that it didn't have. I like to think of West Seattle as being a small town. And there are 3 small towns, the 3 junctions, and each has its own character and flavor. And the 3 together add up to a larger town that has almost everything we need.
Are any of the stores or businesses in the junction different, or what were the ones that have been around for a long time?
Since we've lived here, the junction's changed. The Admiral Cafe went away and has become Bank of America. The Benbow Inn used to be attached to a restaurant that went away and then now has come back as a restaurant. They're apparently not going to develop that block yet for a while, which doesn't break my heart too much. The Safeway was remodeled. Other than that, stores like Wiseman's and the card shop and the theater, they've all been there before we moved in.
And why?
Oh, we love to be able to walk to where we wanted to go. We could walk to shopping, we could walk to the theater, we could walk to down to the Alaska Junction. We didn't need to be in our cars unless we wanted to. It's close to Alki Point. We can drive down Fairmont and park and walk on the beach. It's large. There's a lot of places to be not seen in the park. The park department cooperated and cleaned a lot of that up, so it's more visible. They leave the lights on now at night. People walk their dogs. You can walk to that park at midnight and be safe.
So, do you think there's any more gang stuff going on that would make it more unsafe for us? Because since there was then, I don't know if it's come back or not.
I've not seen any indication of gang activity at all. Usually, my understanding is you can detect some of it by vandalism, graffiti. We had one presumably kid from West Seattle, but I don't know that, tagged our garage in 20 years. That's the only thing that we've ever experienced.
So you said that there's that one kid who tagged your garage. Are there any do you see groups of kids walking home and doing just talking, or do you see them usually on their phones? Are they more social, or are they more engaged in their electronics?
Probably the big change is the electronics. The earbuds are in 24/7. But for the most part, being close to 3 schools, Madison, Lafayette, and West Seattle, we see a lot of kids of all ages. Most of them are just talking. A lot of them you see after school bouncing a basketball down the street, headed to Hiawatha Park to shoot some hoops, throw a frisbee. They're mostly just walking to and from school, and it's a delight to have them. To go to Alki Point in the summer, especially as kids. One of the things that we like about West Seattle is that it is not on the way to any place. And so most people don't come to West Seattle unless they have a reason to come here. It's not a big shopping mecca. It's not we don't have big box stores. It's not on the way to any place. I mean, you don't come to West Seattle to go someplace else because there's just water. Most people that come are down at Alki, for all intents and purposes, we could be living in a small town in eastern Washington.
So you said you came here before you moved here because you wanted to go to Alki Point and stuff. Is there a specific reason why you moved to West Seattle from where you were before?
Well, we've always liked West Seattle. My wife was from the North End, north of Seattle. I've always known about West Seattle, and this is one of the first neighborhoods that we looked at when we wanted to buy. We liked the older houses, we liked the older neighborhoods, we liked the small feel of the area. Like I say, it's like a small town. We didn't want to live in the city. It's too big and too crowded. We like that we can walk places. We don't have to get in our car.
So, since you like to walk places, it's
Go skiing the next day.
we've heard about Coleman Pool before. Did you ever go there and visit it and see how it was?
My mother took us there quite often in the summer, swimming in Coleman Pool. That was probably in the early 50s, probably 1950 to 1955, something like that. We'd go fairly often in the summer, and because Lincoln Park too was the closest park for us other than Saltwater Park.
So how has Coleman Pool changed in Lincoln Park? Was it bigger or more people?
I only know about Coleman Pool now from the news. I think that they've remodeled it. I have not been there. As far as I can tell, Lincoln Park has not changed a lot, other than more people.
So
You can ask the one about anything he wants to.
You said that since you live right next to, right by West Seattle High School, there's lots of kids walking around there. Do you think there's a lot of kids living around your neighborhood, or just they go through your neighborhood?
When we first moved in, busing was being done, and most of the kids came from out of the neighborhood. Since then, they're all neighborhood kids. You see the same kids over and over again, walking through the neighborhood. You get to know them. It's changed in that when there was busing, we didn't see the kids. They just disappeared after school. Now we see them in the neighborhood, walking down the alley, walking down the street, going to the park. It's Safeway.
do you like that better than the busing when it was there?
Oh, yes, it's one of the things that we enjoy the most about the neighborhood is the diversity in the neighborhood. And I think we sometimes forget that diversity includes children. That a society that just has us older people in it isn't as much fun. So it's really a delight to see the kids of all ages.
Is there anything else that we kind of skipped over, or anything else you want to tell us about how West Seattle has changed since when you moved here till now? Yes.
Well, not really, but the only other thing is that the remodel of West Seattle High School. We were driven crazy during the remodel, but we were glad they did it. It turned out to be a beautiful school, and they preserved all the architecture of it. It's always a shame when houses are torn down and new square houses are built. And there's very little of that going on in West Seattle, so the remodel of the high school was important to us.
Okay. Thank you for coming to our interview, and